So here I already have kind of a mixture of slides. Frédéric kindly sent me some slides, and I have some own slides that are not as perfect as this one, but I didn't take them out. But I also went through this. So we have this multiple service locations, um, and there's multiple CRs available. I get to this in a second. What was done here for multiple service locations is the ability to provision expose multiple service locations at reference point M4. So multiple service locations is a bit of an abstract concept, but typically what it does is that you can have multiple base URLs being included, and the base URLs could then be used for different purposes, and we get there in a second. And you have a content preparation to create, update the media entry points, and prepare ingested content for this. And then there's also a concept referred to as service chaining, that you can have multiple instances of ASs being chained. To be honest, I never understood the relevancy of this chaining, but I hope that Richard or someone can explain me why this chaining was needed. For me, this is something that is I would have always liked to avoid, but to have instances. But somebody can explain maybe the chaining necessity.
Yeah, it's a shame we don't have JSON really, but I think the basic idea is that you could have an application server in a different 5GMS system connecting to one your system, and you can form hierarchies. And this is something that's very common in commercial CDNs to form hierarchies. Um, but I think when you have an organizational boundary, it effectively becomes a different 5GMS system. So this additional reference allows you to plug one into another. I think that's my understanding.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think it's more an implementation question than a logical function question, but it's maybe good to have it. There's one other interface which we added and which is kind of dashed here. And I believe that's a relevant interface. And okay, now people can argue, why are you so interested in these interfaces and what is right? This M13, but we had this M8, right? But we consider that there is several cases where the client itself will go outside of the AS and get data from the application service provider directly. And it's actually an interface that was not available, and that helps conceptually in a couple of cases. It helps in particular that case, because what could be the case is that the client is getting content from an AS, but the content as one of the service locations could be outside it. And I think that's a very valid operational point. So here you're in a controlled environment, you are getting monitored. Here you're outside of this, but the client still is acting like this. And I think that's a neat extension. And you can use this not only for that purpose. For example, we use this also in the DRM case when the license server, the client accesses the license server, which is in the application provider domain and so on. So I think this was an important architectural extension to be done to have this M13D that connects here. I don't believe it changes the implementation, but it's logically relevant. And then we also went through the case that we extended a bit the context of the media entry point, and we extend the media access client. And the media access client now incorporates basically is here. It might also contact not only an MPD server or a segment server, it could also contact like a content steering server, though that's part of the AS, right? Because all of this is kind of user plane aspects, and here also here. And then there is a couple of aspects that I go into more details so later. So what you can do here, so switching, concurrent usage, and so on and so on. So that is core topics that need to be discussed when you use this, and I get there in a second. I had my own diagram that I skip here for a second, but the basic idea is that we have this multi-CDN client or multi-service location client. It's an integral part of the media player, right? So that's kind of here. And then what is also said is locations, service locations can be differentiated. And I think the opportunities here also on commercial aspects that you can have different dynamic policies. It could be different access networks. So how you on the underlying aspects now implement a different service location. It could also be different costs associated to this and so on and so on. And multi-CDN operations are nowadays very common. They allow you to have flexibility in the deployments. That's what I said here. So one aspect is service locations, one being in the AS, one being outside. So that is probably interesting. And then there's a reference also that many of this has been triggered by the CMFF context, which is a specification published by ETSI 103973. And this is built such that you can produce multiple variants of let's say, a segment, and these multiple variants are to some extent complementary and can be distributed at different CDNs. And if you access these different variants simultaneously, then you can collect the data and recover from a subset of the data of each of those the segment. And that allows that you get robustness during operation, right? If one CDN is not performing well or one access service location is not performing well, you get the data from the other one. And then you would have to stop getting access to this and so on and so on. So that will require some work. It's probably a more advanced protocol, but it's something that is now supported. So this is from a high level. Now, what did we do in the stage 3? And I apologize, this is not everything. So there's some updates done to 158 to the generic procedures, and there's also now 3 CRs that go into 26.512. So at the end, this is all one update, but it just separates a bit the topics. So the first 2 are generic procedure updates. And you can go into the details. One is this procedures for the service chaining and this external interface, which is new. And then we have a general summary in 26.510. No, I think this is 512. It's 512. Sorry. 10.3a. And we have 3 variants. And the 3 variants are, the first one is switching between multiple service locations during content distribution. The other one is concurrent use of multiple service location for content distribution. And the third one is support content steering for content distribution. So switching really means I have, for example, a full copy of the content on one service location and a full copy on the other one. And then there is a way to basically switch, and the switching might be done by the client because it observed that one of the service location is not performing well, so I switch. It might also be done by other purposes, or the support for content steering would basically be a kind of an extension to this one. The second one is the concurrent use of multiple service location, where you actually access the content from multiple ones. And the most prominent example is usage of CMFF, where you download from like 3 service locations. But there could also be other cases that, for example, if you have maybe regionalized cases that maybe one CDN only distributes one language, you could maybe get the language from a different CDN that is predominantly hosted in the US, because you want the English language, which is not distributed in Germany. So I don't believe it's restricted to CMFF, but we separate these type of things. And that obviously has a bit of consequences because you keep more or less connecting to multiple service locations. Whereas here is you only connect to one. And then we updated, we have created two annexes, or at least a subset of annexes. So there's a more detailed instruction how you do dash content distribution, using multiple service location. And it tells you how you prepare the content to support multiple service location. For example, what you put into the MPD, how you basically tag the service locations, how you create base URLs with AESs, and so on and so on. And then we have content authoring requirements for three specific functions: client-side switching. So that's relatively trivial. Trivial. You have multiple service locations. You leave it to the client to decide if and how to use this. And then there's content steering for Dash with a reference mostly to ETSI TS103998. So that tells you how you have to prepare the content, and it also tells you how the client has to act based on the instruction it gets from the server. And the third one is the send for M. This is what we have already in 3GP 26247. It's basically send based with some very specific aspects. In that case, it's very close to content steering, but you don't have a dedicated request to a content steering server. What you use basically, again, custom headers to inform when you do MPD requests to steer the client. So it's kind of, I think in my opinion, it's even better than content steering, but that is just my personal opinion. And then we have an Annex H, and the Annex H is in details referring to, is using CMFF. It's all the procedures for CMFF-based distribution. There's protocol and formats for downlink streaming using CMFF is reference to 103973. And there's many examples, informative implementation guides how to do this. Maybe just on the last one, there's CMFF is more a format today. It's less of a detailed protocol, so there is some steps for the implementation. There is a very basic protocol available that is maybe not perfect and a bit clumsy. It's reusing EFTT concepts, or basically there's currently work in ETSI to augment this and make it closer to a streaming protocol, which would naturally fit into this annex at some point in time. Okay, so that's what I have here. I haven't thought yet about the implementation, or I haven't documented. I have thought about that. That should be done, and we should do this. But before we go there, let me check if people want to add things. What I have presented, or if you have questions.